Welcome to our first Facebook session. We'd like to bring you important topics that will help you with your day-to-day operations on property. I'm Vicki Bell, the corporate trainer for Navigate Affordable Housing Partners. During the month of February, we've talked about the Violence Against Women's Reauthorization Act of 2013. Henceforth, we'll call it the VAWA 2013 Final Rule. To speed things along so that we can get to your questions, I'm just going to give you a synopsis of some things that we've talked about during the month of February. First of all, the final rule was effective December the 16th, 2016. The final rule lists a host of programs and housing providers that will fall under the VAWA 2013 final rule. I encourage you to read the final rule and to make sure that your program is among the list. You can also find the list on our website. The VAWA 2013 is accompanied by 4 appendices, Appendix A, B, C, and D. You should be familiar with Appendix A and C by now because you should be giving them out during your annual recertification to all of your move-ins and to anyone who's denied an application at your property. One of the most key elements to VAWA 2013 that will be challenging for us as managers will be the VAWA Emergency Transfer Policy. Now, the VAWA Emergency Transfer Policy is accompanied with Appendix D, which is a request for an emergency transfer. HUD has required that all covered providers implement and process a emergency transfer policy. With that being said, you've got your work cut out for you. You need to look at your tenant selection plan, your existing transfer policy, and the way that you're operating now, especially your VAWA policy. With that being said, let's think about the policy in hand with the existing transfer policy you have. You'll probably have to give preferences, and you want to make sure that you have those listed in the emergency transfer policy. Also, I want you to keep in mind that this policy is to be implemented by June the 14th, 2017. June the 14th, 2017, you should have an executed VAWA emergency transfer policy. We'll take questions and we'll come back for follow-up and closing.
Vicki, we have a question. Does VAWA apply to same-sex couples?
The question is, does VAWA apply to same-sex couples? VAWA does apply to same-sex couples. VAWA applies to anyone who's victimized or is a victim of domestic violence, dating violence, stalking, and sexual assault. Hi, Bill in Silicaga. What's your question?
Vicki, while Bill is typing his question, you said it applies to same-sex couples. Does it apply to men and children?
Very good question. Does VAWA apply to men and children? Yes, it does. It's not a gender-oriented policy. It applies to men as well as children, anyone who's victimized, anyone who's affiliated with a victim. Which brings to mind that in reading the new final rule, you will find that there are a lot of terms that we did not use in prior VAWA policies, such as people who are associated with the victim. Next question.
What should I do if there is a request for an emergency transfer but I have no vacancies?
The question is, what should you do if there's a request for an emergency transfer but you don't have any vacancies? HUD has given us specific instructions in the final rule that if you do not have a property available, that the resident can wait for a property, or you can transfer them to a sister property, another property that you have. However, they do have to qualify for that property. HUD has also told us that management companies should work together and they should have a cooperative effort to house the victims of domestic violence. So with that being said, you might be able to have a transfer or another property to help host your property.
Vicki, a question from Bill Hamilton regarding the VAWA. Will the current software such as Yardi incorporate the new VAWA forms?
Bill wants to know if his software will incorporate the new VAWA forms. The forms are basically the appendices and the policy that you have to write. I don't think that your software will. However, you can check with your software provider.
I have another question. What should we do when both people have a history of fighting and causing trouble? Who gets to stay in the unit?
The question is, what happens when both of the present residents are both victims, or they claim both to be victims? How do you decide who will stay in the unit and who will go? That's a hard one. And I think that that would be according to what your policies and procedures say. Your policies and procedures might say the first one to file as a victim would be the person who got to stay. HUD does not address that in the final rule. However, they do address that if the residents, whether they're victims or not, cause an undue or unfair hardship on the property to the point that they are risking or putting at risk the other residents' lives or their livability on the property, then you can evict.
Vicki, I have a resident that wants help but is afraid to put anything in writing for fear the wife will find out. Am I required to do anything?
The question is, there's a resident who will not come forth as a victim because they're afraid that the other spouse will find out. Is management required to do anything? Yes, you are. If you know that a person is a victim, the VAWA rule tells you to refer them to agencies for help. Even though you might not want to get involved directly between the two, you should refer them to an agency that can give them help or offer them help. And that's a part of your emergency transfer. If you read the final rule, it tells you to have on hand agencies that you can refer victims to.
More questions, Vicki. Can we just use HUD's model documents and add our name?
HUD has said that you can use the Appendix B, which is the transfer policy, and just add your name. However, they also said that you can recreate the policy as long as you use and encompass the verbiage and the regulations that are in Appendix B. HUD has also said that you can use a request or ask for proof that a person is a victim.
Oh, a very good one from Tracy. What is expected to be in a file when having an MOR?
Very good question, Tracy. What's expected to be in your file when having an MOR? HUD says that you're to give Appendix A and Appendix C to your current residents and to your new move-ins. They did not say that you had to have an acknowledgement in the file. However, we know about document, document, document. Those are our words in this industry. So Navigate is suggesting that you add those documents to the acknowledgments that you already have. You have the EIVNU, the residents' rights and responsibilities. So add Appendix A and C to those acknowledgments. Have the residents to acknowledge that they received them, and that way the resident won't forget that you talked to them or you offered them those coverages.
Vicki, a question from Bill. We just learned about a new appendices last week. Should we just start from here on out with any new move-ins and ARs and IRs? And where can we get the forms?
Great question, Bill. No, HUD says that everyone on your property, even if they have gone to be a market resident on your property, has to have an Appendix A and an Appendix C. All you have to do is make sure that you give one to those people even though their annual recertification has passed. For instance, so for example, we've already done, or should have already done, our annual recertifications for January and February. We're now into March. You need to go back and give those residents who had recerts in January and February a copy of Appendix A and Appendix C. Where can the forms be found? The forms are found on HUD clips. The Appendix A is 5380, HUD Form 5380. Appendix B is HUD Form 5381. Appendix C is HUD Form 5382. And Appendix D is HUD Form 5383.
Perfect. A question from Jillian. What happens if the person is not willing to use the agencies you have referred them to? What is our next option?
Great question, Jillian. You want to document everything that you do. Now, just like our affirmative fair housing marketing plan, we can't make people move into our property, and we can't make the victims come forth, but we can reveal to them their rights and what HUD is willing to do for them. So document your file with the name of the agencies and any contact information and any help that you've tried to give that resident.
Vicki, another question. Should we have a separate emergency transfer plan, or can we incorporate the emergency transfers into our current transfer policies?
The question is, do you have to have a separate emergency transfer plan, or could you incorporate the verbiage and the regulations into your current plan? HUD says that you have to have a VAWA emergency transfer plan. So I would have a separate plan that outlines the rights and the responsibilities and the steps that you want the victims to take when requesting an emergency transfer. However, I would incorporate into my existing transfer plan the existence of a VAWA emergency transfer plan.
Okay, a question from Tracy. Do we have to provide these forms to our market renters too?
Great question, Tracy. When you read the final rule, HUD tells you that it's only the covered projects that are to receive. However, they suggest that if you have market renters on your property, that you also give this to them. It couldn't hurt, and you would be covered.
Another related question, or a question related to earlier. I've received a request for a transfer, but she's kicked him out before and let him back in. Can I deny that request?
That's a typical question. We hear it when we're on property over and over. We hear it when we get resident complaints over and over. It was in the HUD session. It's in the final rule. In reading the final rule, you'll see where the panel posed all type of questions to HUD. And this question was posed to HUD. In fact, the question was, how many times do we have to allow them to have how many times is the victim, do we have to allow the victim to let the person, the arbitrator, come back in? And they said, as many times as necessary. So to answer your question, there is no time limit, and HUD did not address that. In fact, they said that you could not deny them, even if it's been 7 times 70, if you understand what I'm saying.
Okay. Vicki, one more question. For the folks that will have an MOR next month, will they receive a finding if they have not started to distribute the notice of occupancy rights and certification?
The question is, will you receive a finding if you have an MOR next month, and if the residents haven't received Appendix A and Appendix C? And the answer is yes. There are contract administrators that are already finding, simply for the fact that the rule went in effect December the 16th, 2016. HUD has provided the forms for you. For the most part, all you have to do is make sure you distribute them.
Okay. Vicki, a question again from Bill. I'm currently using the VAWA form that expires June 2017. Will these new forms replace them?
Great question, Bill, and the answer is no. You're going to use the new forms as they're intended, but you're going to still use your VAWA addendum. Even though HUD realizes that there's an expiration on it, they tell us that they're coming out with a new form with a new expiration. But by all means, and I want everybody to understand that, your VAWA lease addendum is still effective and you must still use it. Any other questions? We're waiting on you. You can find the HUD notice on, you can go to www.gov and look up HUD notices, and you can find the final rule there. The final rule is 114 pages. It's not really easy reading, but it's worth the reading. I suggest that you take a highlighter, you highlight the things that interest you, and if you have any questions, feel free to give us a call.
We also have VAWA updates on our website, navigatehousingconsulting.com, and they can just search VAWA, V-A-W-A, and it will pull up all our articles on it.
Okay.
Oh, I have a question. If we send every current resident the forms, but we don't have them sign an acknowledgement, can we certify that we have given all residents the forms to be in compliance for the MOR?
Yes, you can.
That's from Veronica.
Hi, Veronica. Yes, you can, simply because HUD did not say that you have to have an acknowledgement. My problem with us not getting an acknowledgement is sometimes our residents just don't remember. And we've had residents to call in, even with the documents that you're giving them, acknowledgements. Ma'am, did you know how your rent is determined? No, they never gave me that paper. We suggest that you use the acknowledgement just for the basis that you will be covered, and it won't be your word against the resident's word as to whether or not they received the form.
What if you have a resident who you know is in trouble, but they won't ask for help? What is overreaching as far as what our job is?
That's a good question. What if you have a resident that you know might be a victim, but they won't come forth? What is overstepping in terms of management? I don't think that there is such a thing as overstepping. The thing is that you'd have to gain that resident's confidence, and you'd have to let them know what your company's VAWA policy is and what rights and protections they have up under the law. VAWA has been around a long time, so has domestic violence. It's hard, so I'm told in interviewing a victim yesterday, it's hard for a victim to learn to trust, know who to trust, and not feel victimized. So my suggestion to you would be to try to gain that confidence and let them know that you are there to help them and what their rights are for living in your property under the HUD VAWA 2013 final rule, which also brings to mind, in doing and conducting your emergency transfer policy, I would suggest that management have a person that the residents could go to for VAWA. And I say that because, as you know, we can't keep the existing VAWA file in with our other files. You have to put it in a separate folder. So that tells you right there that there's some confidence and some trust issues. So designate a person at the office, whether it's a regional manager or a manager, and have all of your VAWA transactions, calls, channeled through that one person, and they can gain the confidence of those victims.
Vicki, we have another question from Tracy. Should this be included in our tenant selection plan, or should it be a separate policy?
Hi, Tracy. Great question. Yes, you're going to have to audit your tenant selection plan somewhat, and simply because the victims are going to be given preference. Your applicants need to know what preferences and who can move in ahead of them, because of course that's a fair housing violation. If you move one person in before another without the regulations, the HUD regulations. So by all means, you're going to have to revamp your tenant selection plan. You need to revamp your present transfer plan and waiting list. You need to let the applicants know that the VAWA victims will take preference. And you also might want to even look at your termination letters, because a copy of the documents are to be given at termination also. When you deny an applicant, he or she should be able to read that tenant selection plan and see that why they're denied for that same reason. If you deny, and that's the whole purpose of VAWA, so that you will not deny housing to victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking.
Great. We have a question from Bill. Once we have the new VAWA forms in the resident file, will this have to be done on an annual basis or a one-time thing?
The VAWA addendums are a one-time thing. You don't have to do them at each AR, but you want to make sure that you have them. Now, HUD did not say that you had to keep a copy in the file, and that's why we suggest acknowledgments, because you know our files can go from here to there. So you might want to consider just doing an acknowledgement and not putting a copy of the appendix in your file.
Okay. A question from Jillian. Is management held liable if there is a death that results from a domestic situation that you've done everything in your power to educate the victim about?
The question from Jillian, and a great question, Jillian, is what's management's responsibility if management has done everything within their power to help, assist, and aid the victim, yet there's a death that occurs? Far too often, even though we might not know it, far too often deaths do arrive. And your responsibility is as much documentation as you can show and or provide. There are certain things that you won't be able to prevent, but there are certain things that you should do, such as your addendums, talking to the victims, trying to relocate them with the emergency transfer policy. It is really sad, and domestic violence has taken several lives. And the only thing I can say about that, Jillian, is you want to document. You want to do your best, because as I tell you all, if you've ever been to any of my trainings, that residents are protected through legal aid. Legal aid costs them nothing. To defend that legal aid suit, your company has to pay out. And for some reason, attorneys like to say, we're going to get everybody involved. We're going to sue them individually, cooperative, the company, everybody. So you want to make sure that you have plenty of documentation. So if you have to go to court, you can prove that you did everything possible to be of assistance to that domestic victim.
Vicki, another question from Veronica. How often will properties be required to update assisting agencies' information?
For Veronica, that's a good question. The final rule doesn't really say how often, but they do tell you to give the names, phone numbers, contact information of the agencies to your residents. And I would say as often as you think that's necessary. And saying that, I'm saying that I went down to our local YWCA, and she was able to give me some brochures. Have literature in your office so that even though a person might want to come in and might not want to just say or admit that they're a victim, have literature around the office so that they can pick it up and they can contact these agencies.
Vicki, a question again about the tenant selection plan from Tania. Should we include this in our tenant selection plan?
Tania, yes. You should update your tenant selection plan to include, and your house rules, to include the VAWA 2013 final rule.
Okay, a question from Brendan. I'm concerned that this will create clear and present danger for management to get involved. even though it's policy or amended both parties, if both are residents, will know that the management has gotten involved. Who's to say the violent person won't try to harm the management staff?
Was it Tamia?
No, that's from Brenda.
Brenda.
Yes.
Brenda, that's an interesting question. Who's to say that if you don't get involved and try to get victim help, that management won't be harmed anyway? That's one of those catch 99 type things. You have to follow the guidelines of HUD. And if you follow those guidelines, not saying to put yourself in danger or go out of your way, but just to document and follow the HUD guidelines, it's hard to say. We know of cases where a resident was evicted and came back and shot the manager. Who's to say that you should not serve your eviction notices? You're going to serve them, right? All I can say is, as managers, and I've been a manager, I've been a regional manager, we have to be careful in everything that we do. Take precautions. Try not to show sides. Try to stay strictly with the regulations. Any other questions?
So we're going to stay on for about 5 more minutes, 10 minutes tops, to take more questions. So if you have them, please ask them now.
Again, we want to thank you for tuning in. We want to thank those who asked questions, because they were all good questions. Great. If you need any assistance from us, let us know. We will be posting things on our website from time to time. And as I say, this is the first of our Facebook Live sessions. I'm going to see if they can get somebody else to do that.
No ma'am, no ma'am.
Feedback. Give us some feedback. Have you been liking the Tuesday tips? Do you have an interest in topics that we have not covered yet? If so, just send us an email and let us know. Type it in now and let us know subjects that you would like for us to cover.
On this Facebook Live.
Okay. We also want feedback on Facebook Live. Do you like this Facebook Live session? Are you enjoying the Tuesday tip sessions? Just tell us how we can be of service to you, because that's what Navigate wants to do. We want to be of service to you.
Okay, I have a question from Alicia.
Okay, Alicia?
In what manner should we document that we have given Appendix A and C to rejected applicants or residents whose assistance is terminated?
Wow,
That's a good one.
That is a good question. We have not been asked that question. Again, since HUD doesn't require acknowledgments for my rejected applicants, when you send them the rejection package, I would include a copy of the appendix in that rejection package, because they won't get thick like your files will, your rejection packages will not. As far as terminations, you know, the whole purpose of the VAWA is to protect victims and people who are associated with victims, not just the victims. Sometimes under domestic violence, the entire household, the kids, the mother-in-law, the aunt, the uncle, the cousins, whoever live in that household can also be abused. And so you just want to make sure that you give a copy of the information so they will know their rights. And that's as much as we can do. Let them know that you do have rights under the Violence Against Women's Act.
For anyone who has further questions, you can email them to Vicki Bell at vbell@navigatehousing.com. That's VBELL at navigatehousing.com. We'll also be posting this video on our Facebook page and on our other social media platforms.
So Veronica, that includes the last question because it's something we did.
Okay, and Veronica, it does include your last question because it is something that we did previously cover.
So we'll get to it.
So we'll get to that, and also check out our website at navigatehousing.com, because we'll have any other questions that you have, we'll answer them there.
Awesome.
Anybody else before we leave? Before we let Ms. Vicki get out of the hot seat?
Just want to mention that as early as today, our executive director and I received an email about domestic violence. The victim, we don't think, has reported the violence yet. It was reported by an association or an agency to HUD, and of course HUD called us and asked us to look into it. Sometimes you do have to go that extra mile, and being a victim of domestic violence is like being a victim of anything else. You don't understand it if you have never been there. You don't understand it if you have not stood in those shoes. So I encourage you to encourage your residents. Even sometimes, you know, the neighbors, they tell you everything that happens on the property. Sometimes they know of abuse that you don't know about. So have those flyers and the literature around in your lobbies and what have you, and try to encourage them.
Okay, we have one question from Tracy. I guess you mean, why are we sending A and C to terminated and rejected applicants?
Because HUD says so.
That's a quick answer.
If you read the notices, you will find out that HUD really wants to make sure. All of this kind of started because victims of domestic violence were being denied housing. They had police reports, and it was one of these things that, oh no, the police has been to your property or been to your unit 5 times. We don't want you here at our property. You cannot deny them housing because they have been victims.
Also a question from Barbara. If an applicant reveals she's leaving an abusive relationship but can't get a rental reference from the landlord because the lease is in the abuser's name, if verifying rental is part of the selection process, how should we proceed?
Leases can be bifurcated, and because they can, all she has to do is have a letter of reference, and HUD says this is the final rule, that if you require proof that a person is a victim, they can bring you a copy of a police report, they can bring you documentation from an agency, they can bring you documentation from a family member, and you should accept it.
Okay, Veronica's question. She says, I think I missed this earlier, so for clarification, we send out forms to all residents now, and then whenever a new resident moves in, provide forms, and at annual cert, provide again?
You did kind of miss it, Veronica, so let me restate it for you. HUD says that from December the 16th, 2016 to December the 15th, 2017, all of your existing residents have to be given a copy of Appendix A and Appendix C, and those 2 documents are given together. You don't have to give them to everyone on your property now. You can do it at annual recertification. However, each new move-in, you will be given a copy of the Appendix A and the Appendix C too. Those certifications that were ARs prior to you starting or getting started or getting involved with VAWA 2013, you need to go back and make sure that those residents have received a copy of the Appendix A and the Appendix C. Moving forward, let's say with your April and May annual recertifications, you could give those documents to your applicant, not to your applicants, to your residents during recertification. So the period that you want to make sure that you've covered is January, February, March, and also December, because the rule went into effect December the 16th. So you would have done your annual recertifications on or for December the 1st.
Okay, Vicki, for a clarification for Tracy, she meant which forms for the rejected and the terminated, and then should those be attached to, should these forms be attached to the application?
The forms that you need to give to the rejected applicants and to the household members that have been terminated are the Appendix A and the Appendix C. Those are the only 2 forms that you need to give. Appendix B is a copy of the HUD model transfer policy. Appendix D is a request for the emergency transfer. Read, guys, read the notices. Read the emergency request. Find out what HUD requires you to do in order to transfer or give an emergency transfer to a victim. Incorporate that into your emergency transfer plan.
Okay, Vicki, a great question from Angela.
Hi, Angela.
If we deny an applicant due to credit or criminal background and the applicant states that they are a victim, do we have to allow them to move in?
Great question. If you deny an applicant due to criminal, credit, any of the eligibility criteria, but they say that they are a victim, do you have to allow them to move in? The criminal report, and you know we've kind of briefly talked about that, arrest versus convictions, so make sure you're straight there. The criminal report has nothing to do with being a victim. However, the credit report might. We have seen cases and read of cases where the victims have been made to use their credit cards, their bank accounts, and those type of things, which will impact their credit reports. Though that might be a part of being victimized. You have to handle each on a case-by-case basis. However, you have to make sure that they're eligible otherwise to be in the property. And HUD is saying, look at the victims a little bit differently to make sure that this credit is because he or she was a victim of domestic violence and made to do this, not because he or she liked Neiman Marcus, Saks Fifth Avenue, dealers, and just didn't want to pay them.
I think we're going to finish up here. Just a reminder that you can find information on this on our websites at navigatehousing.com and also navigatehousingconsulting.com. This video will reside here on Facebook, and we'll be posting it to our other social media platforms as well.
Great, guys, and thank you once again for calling in. Great questions. I enjoyed them. If you have any other questions, as Ebony has said, you can reach me at vbell@navigatehousing.com, and I look forward to it. If you run into things with your emergency transfer policy or just need to know what needs to go in there, feel free. Remember, we're here to help you. Thank you from Navigate Affordable Housing Partners.